Welcome to Deep Work Out Loud, the thinking that fuels our life, our work, and our leadership. I'm Julie Harris Oliver. This is the podcast where I sit with another professional coach and we do some work around a single concept, a piece of inspiration, a topic maybe we've seen come up in coaching. If we're really lucky while we're talking about it, we might get a minute where we might see what coaching might look and feel like, but we'll see how this goes. This is all an experiment. With any luck, you will leave with something that you can apply and use in your work or your life or both. So today I'm here with Erin Winkler-McCue. As a coach, advisor, and company builder, Erin unlocks potential for leaders who refuse to settle for good enough. She works with established and emerging leaders to expand their leadership capacity and organizational impact. And she has an exceptional ability to unlock potential. Sometimes this means crafting solutions, other times it involves thought partnership and building awareness. Clients choose to work with Erin because she's been in their shoes and has the coaching mastery to surface what's actually blocking their progress. She spent 2 decades building world-class organizations, leading operations, strategy, and customer-facing revenue efforts at 5 successful startups and 2 public companies. She's also an ICF ACC certified coach with formal training from the Hudson Institute and Leadership Circle. This combination is the real differentiator, and if you're Erin's clients and you're facing your biggest leadership roles to date, this can be a game changer. Hi, Erin.
Hey, nice to be here.
Before we dig in, will you tell us what led you to become a coach?
Good question. So you probably hear this a lot, but it's not a traditional path. As you said, I was at a number of companies. I was at small companies. I was the ninth hire. I was also at large public companies. Over time, over 20 years, I will say, I saw a pattern, which was that what I liked doing most was helping people with the less tangible stuff, um, digging into the things that got in their way of having greater impact. But it didn't always mean, most of the time, it didn't mean that it was functional knowledge. It wasn't a VP of finance needing to better understand finance, but it was him maybe reconnecting with his values in order to be able to successfully execute a reorg. And that is an actual example. But I realized that's what really gave me passion and energy. And so it's very meta, but I realized that I wanted to spend my time doing that. And I realized that I wanted to spend my time helping others find what they were passionate about and unblock their leadership so that they could take it to the next level. Um, what I realized I'm most interested in doing is working with leaders who are in their biggest role to date, because that's really where I feel like the rubber hits the road.
That's great. What topic did you bring today to talk about?
Well, I was hoping to talk about experimentation because I have worked with a number of people who get stuck. And it seems like you get these things that are such big ideas that week over week, they sit with them and think about them and think about them. And so I have really seen experimentation help my clients not overnight make change, but gradually make change in a way that's very sustainable. And I thought it was something you may have had experience with as well.
I'm literally doing it right now.
Exactly. We do it while we help our clients with it.
Yes, the podcast is a whole experiment. But tell
Yeah.
me, what does that look like in your coaching? Because I'm imagining a leader like, I
Yeah.
got to make this giant change. I have to think through every eventuality before I even take the
Okay.
first step.
Okay.
Is
Yeah.
that what we're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, can I give you an example that is not about
Please.
coaching for a second? Because
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
people it might work for them. One of my favorite movies is Good Will Hunting.
Mhm.
And so in that movie, there's one scene, I was remembering this as I was thinking about talking to you, because I like to use examples sometimes that people can relate to, regardless of if they've done coaching or not. So in there's a beautiful scene, Robin Williams is the therapist, and he's brought in to help Matt Damon, who's the student, the really brilliant student. And we've seen scene after scene where Matt Damon's character is commenting on things like, well, I know about art and I know about books and I know about this. And in this scene, if you share out this podcast, I can give you a link to use, but it's Robin Williams' character says, there's a lot more than reading in books. And he talks about, like, if I ask you about art, you'll probably say what you read, but have you seen the Mona Lisa up close? Or I may be misquoting it, but it's something like that. And if I
Have you
ask you about
felt what
something
it
else,
feels like
yeah,
to stand
right.
in
And
it?
have you tried it? And that just really appealed to me, and it's weird because I haven't watched this movie in years, though I do like it a lot, and so I went back and tracked it down to see if, first of all, my memory was correct,
Mm-hmm.
and it really touches on, for me, what is one of the most critical things to making change with clients, which is this knowing and doing gap. I think leaders have probably read a lot of books,
Mm-hmm.
read a lot of articles, seen a lot of stuff, but are they doing what they've read? Or are they doing what leadership should look like for them?
Yeah.
And so that's why experimentation is, I think, really critical. And I have done it with clients a lot and seen really, really fantastic results.
Do you have an example you could share with us?
Well, let's go back to the example I shared a second ago, actually, because I thought it was a really impactful one, was working with this VP of finance.
Hmm.
And he had grown up in the public organization where he was working at the time when I was working with him. And he began as an intern, actually. And so he's now leading a lot of the finance function. He's not CFO yet, but he's in line for that. And he was thinking a lot about what leadership looked like. And imagine if you've been in an organization for so many years, you've learned a lot, but you've also got some associations with being the intern who started at the company.
And I imagine you've seen how leadership has done there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for him, we were facing, challenges for him getting ready for what was next. And we needed to figure out what he could try. And also, if you're already a leader, I think it's very visible, right? So you feel a little bit under the microscope, and you also don't want to misstep if you're so close to having an even bigger role. And you're currently, like I said earlier, in your biggest role to date. And so we really would say, like, what feels comfortable? And for me, it really started with defining what is I want to call it a bite-sized experiment, or sort of a measurable experiment with a start and end. So not making it a big thing. A year-long experiment is not going to help, but saying, like, what can we try? What has been in your mind for a while? And you keep returning to it, but you haven't done it. Can we take it apart and say, what's one step to take, and to then see how it feels?
Now, when you're talking about a step,
Yeah.
excuse me, are you meaning like behave in a slightly different way or implement a different
Mm,
policy? Like
mhm.
what kind of thing you're talking about?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's one or the other. It's figuring out what is their goal.
Hmm.
And so, for example, if they've been thinking, let's choose someone else. I had another client who was trying to figure out, they're a technical co-founder, trying to figure out how to re-engage with the rest of the business, because they have been, in this technical co-founder role for so much time, for so long, that in a sense, they've sort of abdicated their role in the business strategy conversations. There's enough to do on the technical side. And so it's like, that's a big change to make overnight. So it actually, in that case, came down to, when in meetings with the other co-founders, what can you do to try to show up in a different way? Now, you and I both went to the same coaching school, so I think you would agree that it's leading from behind. But asking the client, like, would that be a meaningful stretch for him? And would that feel like something that, I'm going to say, is going to scare him a little? Not too much, but like a measurable level of scariness. Like, is it something you haven't tried? Are we looking to just confirm something you already know? Or are we actually bringing curiosity to the conversation and saying, what could happen? I love experiments where you're not immediately going to say, well, for sure, I'd feel this. So it's the ones where they just pause, and it's a nice, awkward 1 minute with a client. And they're like, I don't know. As long as I get it, I'm willing to try it. That's an experiment worth running. And one of my favorite coaches said something to me early on, which was, an experiment never fails if you run it.
Hmm.
It's if you run the experiment to try something and you end up not liking it, you still ran the experiment. And so if your question is, you've got a hypothesis and you want to get some data on it, running it is really how you succeed.
Because that is success, even if the
Right.
experiment fails. When we were talking about doing this podcast, you said to me that
Yeah.
this is the hill you're going to die on.
Yeah. I think that change, what I've seen is that experiments lead to change in a way that a lot of other stuff doesn't. Like I was saying, you can pick up a bunch of books. How many of us, me included, have a bunch of books on our shelf that we haven't read? Right. And I would love to
So
put my
many.
hand on the book. I would love to put my hand on the book and suddenly know all the information.
Yeah.
But even then, I'm not able to live it and sort of manipulate it and try it. And so for me, this is how I have seen clients make the most effective, and I will say sustainable change, is by taking steps, because I think it teaches muscle memory. And even before that, it teaches an awareness. And a lot of it is not just running the experiment, but committing to, in a sense, debrief it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's with yourself, I'll say, like, if you and I are running one, I'll say, and I don't know if you want to use a real example here, I could do a coaching moment, but it's like, if you're running an experiment, tell me ahead of time what you think success will look like. Or if you get a yes from that experiment, because I don't want to say success, because I think it's successful if you just run it. But if you get a yes from that experiment, what are you going to be looking for? And
And then
so, yeah,
what's the next thing that makes possible?
I think it makes possible greater awareness. I think you start picking up in those moments about, how do you feel? What did you learn about yourself? How did everyone else behave in the room? Using that example of going to meetings and, in this case, it was actually going to meetings and being more involved early on and framing the conversation and not just being a recipient in the conversation. And how do you feel? How do others feel? Is there a business outcome? Are you getting to more of the stuff that you want to see move forward? Do you leave the meeting feeling that you were more engaged, therefore you talked more, therefore you felt like you were more part of the conversation? And then you start getting into this muscle memory over time, because I'd love to say go run an experiment for one, join a meeting for an hour, get deep meaning, but I think you have to, get your reps in,
For sure.
try other things. I think you build experiment on experiment, and over time there's a muscle memory that happens there. And that's what I think leads to change.
Is there any element of what else needs to be true in order for you to engage in the experiment?
Good question. So, yeah, I mean, I think I like to ask that before. I'm not sure if you use a coaching plan with clients,
Mhm.
but sometimes I do, depending on how they learn best and how they make change best. But I often say, like, yeah, what are we going to need to try this? Is there a mindset you want to talk about ahead of time? Like, are we going in with an open mind, or are we going in with this and that? Um, do you want to enlist others to help with that experiment? I would say if you're going to do that, it can be helpful, but also thinking about, like, is that going to, in a sense, produce the signal you're looking for?
Mm.
Or if I enlist others and then I enlist you and then you tell me I did a great job, like, is that going to help me with my own self awareness? How I did in the meeting.
Well, on the other side of it, is it helpful to warn anybody or get any buy-in if you
Mhm.
are going to show up at a meeting completely differently?
Right.
Is there any point in saying,
Yeah.
I'm going to try something here?
Right. Right. Okay. So that's a hard one, because I do like to get the read of the situation without fully enlisting everyone else.
Mhm.
Like, again, we'll use this example. If I'm going to tell you I'm going to a meeting and trying something, you might be predetermined as my friend to say, Erin, you did a great job.
Or set you up,
And
you know?
right, right. Oh yeah, you'll challenge me in the meeting. What do you
Yeah.
mean?
Or let me lob you an easy one.
Right. So ideally I'd say, not, if you're going to do something dramatic, then maybe you enlist a few people. I mean, there's that whole concept of pre-wiring a meeting.
Mhm.
But I really do sort of want that early experimentation to let you get the raw read of the situation. So I would say, actually, if you feel like you need to pre-wire a meeting in order to run something, maybe you start with a less high stakes experiment. So then you can get the read. I have a client who currently, for example, I would say coaching is sort of an experiment for him. And he is a founder, but he chose to pay for this outside of his company's budget because he doesn't want to let other people know he's doing this,
Oh.
because he wants to have an experiment and be able to see what the feedback is over time as he hopefully changes in the ways he wants to change, without having people just sort of preemptively saying, you're doing great. I noticed, you're going to coaching. That's great.
Right. How's that coaching going?
Right. Right. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
How do you use experimentation in your own client work?
Mostly when a lot of my clients are looking for the next rung on the ladder or looking how to get promoted or get to
Mm-hmm.
that next level. And so we're
Mm-hmm.
talking a lot about what are the gaps there and what is it going to
Mm-hmm.
take to get you to that next level, because a lot of them are at that position of that moment when you've been a really good soldier and you need to make
Mm-hmm.
that flip to be a leader. So then what are those behaviors that have to change and what is a mindset that has to change to go there? And so we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at experiments in that context of how could I try to go into this meeting differently? How could
Right.
I try to lead this rather than just being
Mm-hmm.
reactive? I think those are the kinds of experiments we look at.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like that gets at what stopped you from doing this so far. And I'm guessing, I don't want to speak for you, but, like, there are those people who go to coaching for accountability.
And sometimes they're in a position of, oh, I didn't know I could do that.
Right.
Oh, I didn't know
Right,
that was my job. I didn't know
right,
that's how I get
right,
ahead.
right, right. I think those are the great moments, right? When
Mhm.
someone tries something that they saw as this massive thing and they've been thinking about it for a while. And so that's when I said accountability a second ago. I don't mind if it's accountability to say, that's sort of like I said earlier, sort of the thing that scares you just enough. Like if
Mhm.
if if we're talking about accountability, which is I'm going to keep nudging you in a very polite way, and you're paying me to nudge you, but like we're going to keep moving you forward and sort of seeing like what's the extent of your ability to like at what pace can you learn and try new things. And to your point, if they're moving from maybe it's a good soldier into a leadership role or a bigger leadership role, like there are those people who don't like that next step.
Mhm.
um, I know in the world of engineering there are people who end up discovering that when you get more senior you always envision stereotypically you start managing people. I've known engineers who say, I want to be a principal. I don't actually like managing people. I miss my other work.
Yeah,
Eh,
and I think there's a lot of companies fail because they put those people in management who
mhm,
have no interest in
mhm.
managing people.
Right,
They've been the best
right,
engineer for the last
right,
20
right.
years, and they need to pay
Exactly,
them
because they're
more.
yeah, and so I think that's an emerging recognition. I've seen it
Yeah,
happen more in engineering than I think other departments right now.
for sure.
I don't know if there's like a sales principal. I've never heard that role. Maybe they move you into like enablement. But I think that is a recognition. And so how instead maybe do you give an opportunity to experiment? Do they lead a project where half their job is to manage the people and end up realizing they would rather be the lead person with the technology and have the technology be what they're managing, not the people?
Right. Right. I think sometimes there's also an element of permission
Mhm,
that they might be waiting for permission.
mhm,
And so the
mhm.
experiment might be, what if you didn't wait for permission on that
Right.
and
I
ran with it?
yes. I love that one. There's a lot of people out there waiting for that. And I would rather use the constructs we're talking about to help them move forward in whatever feels good to them than letting a layoff, say, happen and force them to try something. Or having someone else, I myself was in this position where someone else raised their hands earlier in my career and became chief of staff of a company I was at. Guess what I wanted to do? I wanted to be
And
chief
so
of
what you
staff.
wanted. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what stopped you?
And I didn't think, it's that stereotypical, like I didn't think I had everything that would check every box. By the way, there was no job
Oh,
description. There was no job description, but it was in my head was why
of
I
course.
couldn't move into that.
Yeah.
It was
We
a
used to
man.
have,
I mean, yeah.
we could do
I'm
a
not going to say it's always a
12-hour,
man. Yeah.
but the data shows women will wait till they have
Yeah.
12 of the 10
Right.
boxes
Right.
checked, and men will wait till they
Yeah.
have three to throw themselves in.
So I did do this a few years later, but my point was I learned from seeing a role that I really wanted go to someone else and thinking, well, I could have done that. I actually had more of those boxes than he had to check. I did learn, at least I learned later. It's not my ideal for clients I work with, but I did learn a few years later. And I ended up proposing on a walk with another founder and CEO I worked for. I was one of the leaders of the customer success team. And I said, can we take a walk? And I said, I'd love to become chief of staff. There's no role like that. Can we craft it? Can we do this and that? This is why I'm qualified. I totally practiced the pitch in a
Wow.
sense before I took this walk because I knew that he liked to have working meetings while we walked. So I knew I couldn't have notes in front of me or anything. And so I practiced this whole like I say this and I say this. Didn't totally follow the script, but it worked. But it's because I learned from it, the example in front of me a few years earlier.
What steps did you have to take between watching that happen and doing it
Mhm.
yourself?
So I'm not proud of the fact that I think it took longer than I, needed to act. But I think a lot of observation, a lot of understanding of what were the unmet needs. What did I want to do? I did, I think one thing for me in terms of an experiment, one thing for me was really getting to know the people I would then be working with to see if I liked them.
Oh,
And how did I show up? Was I able to be my best self when I was in a room of people who were more senior than me? And sort of starting to test that sort of thing. I did not pitch this role to someone I didn't know, right? I knew how we'd work together. That role in particular is very dependent on the person you're working for.
hmm,
And so I guess you could say I'm thinking about it now. I actually didn't think about this before, but it was sort of testing the water to see if I enjoyed that because I wasn't sure. I'm an introvert. I didn't know if I wanted to suddenly be in a role where one of my jobs was rallying all the leadership team on a regular basis, orchestrating offsites, helping with investor meetings, things like that.
when you said just a minute ago that you were thinking about, do I want to be working closely with all these people and being in situations
Mhm,
to see how you
mhm,
interacted with them. Was that
mhm.
conscious at the time of this is something I want to make sure of before I go for this? Or is this in retrospect, you're thinking, oh, I was doing all these things that led to this other thing?
It's a good question. I think I knew it to some degree because I don't typically seek roles that are highly visible with large groups of people.
Hmm.
And that was exactly what this was. At least this role. I'm going to say chief of staff, depends a lot on the organization. But I think to some degree, I wanted to see if I liked doing it. We didn't call it an experiment. I will tell you because of the situation, I, at the time, owned more revenue than anyone at the company when I wanted to move into this role. So I was actually told, we forecasted you to close X, Y, and Z revenue. And so for a quarter, I needed to do 2 jobs.
How'd that go?
It was a lot of work, but I
Yeah.
was, to what we said earlier, I had energy for it.
Yeah.
I wanted to try something. It wasn't something that was being put on me. I had actually proposed this role. And because I also, knew what the company needed, you can't really just walk away from a revenue role in October because you'd like to try something. It was a Series B startup. So I needed to really, even if I was in chief of staff, we would care about revenue. So I needed to try things. And in retrospect, maybe I could only do that because I was so much younger and had so much more energy. It was crazy, but I did
Sounds
it.
like a lot.
And I think, yeah, but it's driven. I'm sure. I mean, I'm guessing there's things in your life where if you're on the outside, you're looking in and you're thinking, wow, is there anything like that for you?
Oh, all of my 40s. When I, a single
Okay.
mother of 3 kids with a big sales job that was 24 hours a day
Mm.
and a podcast on the side in LA
Right.
traffic. Like
Right.
the thought of
Right.
doing that now,
Right. Right.
no way. But
Someone else might say, do you need the podcast? Right.
the podcast is the only thing keeping me alive.
Exactly. No, that's
Yeah.
my no, that's my thinking. But someone else on the outside might say, what revenue is attached to the podcast? Let's talk about this.
Zero.
Right.
Let me be quite clear. So,
Exactly.
yeah. But it was my
Exactly. But
life.
it's all about right. And so learning that I think matters a lot. And that's one of the reasons back to what you said, like, why do I do coaching? And part of it is being able to help people figure out whether it's in the role they're in now or where they want to take their role in, let's say, 5 years, like what gives them that energy.
Hmm.
And I find that experimentation helps with not getting hung up on a very perfect plan that either you never implement or when you finally implement it, turns out it may not be what you wanted. And that's unfortunate.
Is that sometimes a tough sell with the type A striver?
I think with coaching, they lead, the client leads. So I'm not starting the hour talking to them about how we're scientists and let's go run an experiment.
Right.
But as they're talking about, what goals do you want, going back to the traditional, like the contracting for the larger engagement and then the contracting for the specific session. How do you want to test? How do you want to learn? What would a milestone be if we're moving towards a certain goal? And then breaking that apart. Okay, how do you get to that milestone? I don't want to ever be a coach who's in like a Gantt chart or something. I don't want to be this project manager. But I think it's helpful to say, like, where do we go? Like, you were here and we're talking, but I think at the end of the day, they're probably going to measure coaching by how they change, not I had a great 60 minutes with Erin and I have another one in 2 weeks. I love that I have lovely clients. I love to talk to them. But at the end of the day, we're there because they have things they want to change.
Hmm. So you got to try something.
Mhm.
And also, may I never see another Gantt chart.
I did have a client who busted out shared her screen and showed me a Moreau board. And I do like Moreau.
Uh-huh.
But still I was like, well, I think, what are we talking about here? And the truth was actually, she was too in it. She was in a strategy role. And she said, yeah, I think I've taken what's a challenge for me anyways about checking boxes and managing things and not going deeper. And she was doing that with me. And so in the moment, we really used what was happening. And I said, I noticed you've showed this thing and you're moving around your little, whatever it is, little visuals. And I said, is this what you want to do together? What are we really talking about here? And we were talking about the fact that she had a very nice, very secure role and she wanted to move into a different part of her organization, which she has since done. But she was hung up on that for a while.
Isn't it amazing how the coaching parallels what's going on outside of
Tell
work?
me more.
I've had that happen as well, where I was with a client listening to what they said and finding myself getting frustrated. I was like,
Mm,
is this, and thinking, is this really how you want to show up with me right now? As they're
mm,
describing, showing up this way with their
Mhm.
boss and getting a very similar reaction as I was feeling in my
Mhm.
body. And it took a couple of sessions for me to really
Hmm.
have the courage to reflect it back. Like, here's how you're showing up here. Are you also showing up that way someplace else? And
Hmm.
it ended up being kind of a breakthrough because it was like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, that is what I'm doing.
Wow. I mean, that takes courage.
It took me several sessions to work it up.
I know you said that. So my question would be, do you do that more frequently now when it feels like the
Um,
situation would benefit from that?
I do it faster now because I just think it's true that
Mhm.
that typically happens. And
Yeah.
you can use how that's showing up.
Yeah. I've been reading a book about coaching and Gestalt,
Mm.
and a lot of it is about the using in the what's in the moment and awareness to what you're saying. And I think it's important. And I think it's part of our job is, there's a reason I put a blocker before every coaching session and after, because I need to be rested and present and all of that stuff. So you can notice what's happening in the moment. So to your comment earlier, like it's not experiments all the time. I just think they're a very helpful tool for coaching
Yeah.
because you also just have to be aware and see what's bubbling up.
When you're working with people on their experiments, what are some of the things that might get in the way?
Sometimes I think it's helpful to have the container of saying I'm going to run an experiment because it's in a sense giving yourself permission,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of how senior you are, to try something new. And so the act of labeling, of framing it in that way, I think helps deal with maybe this traditional sense of possible failure. I think people get really hung up the more senior they go traditionally on adhering to certain roles or, the stories we tell ourselves about what we do and what we don't do. And then you get someone who's spent 30 years in a career, maybe not being fully connected to what they'd most want to do.
And perhaps looking back with regret.
Maybe. Yeah. And I'm not talking about just leaving a job. I'm talking about making sure they're connected to what they want to do. I mean, I think leaders are used to feeling competent. And in a sense, experiments could make you feel temporarily incompetent. They're awkward. I don't think most of us like to be awkward. They're vulnerable. I had this conversation with someone the other day, a client who said, even just asking, how can I help you, was making him feel vulnerable.
Him asking the
Um,
question or you
yeah,
asking him the question?
him asking the question. He's very senior and he felt like he was then opening himself up. And how about if he didn't know how to deliver what was being asked of him in that moment? And there was an element of skill, but there was also an element of him not having a ton of time. So, Julie, am I asking you for something that will take an hour of your time? Or am I asking you it'd be great if all next week we could do such and such.
Yeah.
And deep down, one of his values is supporting others, even beyond work. But to the whole coaching thing about asking these questions, I didn't know that's where it would lead because like you had a look on your face, which was, how does asking, can I help, make you vulnerable?
But yeah, that makes total sense because
Right,
then you're wide open
right,
to, oh,
right,
I may have just asked something that's going to cause me to
right.
have to say no or set a boundary
Hmm.
that I didn't want to
Hmm.
do. And which reminds me, I just went to the Francis Fry workshop about trust. And I
Hmm.
just talked about this the other day about the triangle and one of them being
Hmm.
authenticity and logic.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if you really want to
Hmm.
deliver the things that you say you are, but you've set yourself up
Right,
to not be able to do
right,
that.
right, right.
Yeah.
So I didn't respond and jump in. I don't believe in this copy paste coaching. So I didn't respond and say, let's run an experiment. But I just said, is there something you could try? Because here you're saying you want to play this role. So there's something you could try without feeling so vulnerable that you won't do it. How do we get very close to that level, but not go until you won't do it?
Yeah.
How do we get you near that boundary? And how do you try something? Do you, for example, he says yes to things that are clear and that he knows, and that things that he knows are easy to deliver. So, do you just ask another question? We're not talking about these life changing things overnight, but do you ask another question? Julie,
Is
what do you have in mind when you say, can I help you on the project? That
yeah,
kind of question.
is there a way to put boundaries around a question?
Hmm. Right, right. Yeah. Or is there a way to drill down? I mean, one of the visuals I talk about way too much as a coach is an onion and peeling the onion.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is there a way to just ask a few more questions to sort of zero in on what's really being asked? And then you can say no and that's a whole nother coaching topic, which is how to say no, and boundaries. But where can we take it? We can take it by just narrowing in a little before you have to say yes or no.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I would say to him, do you feel like you have to say yes? Regardless?
And then what's that about?
Yeah. That's an even better question, right? Like going deeper with him, like, what's that about? So if he says yes, it's why? What's driving you to say yes? Maybe it's something in his past. Maybe it's this belief about doing service for everyone. And then the question is, what does doing service for everyone look like?
And what happens if you say no?
Yep. That's a common question probably for a lot of our clients because there's a lot in society associated with saying no.
Mm-hmm.
So you play that out. What happens if you say no? Or if you say, not right now, it doesn't work for this week.
And then how do you feel sitting in that?
Right. Right. Yeah. And I also think there's a lot, if we go back to the original premise for what we're talking about, is it just no and yes? Or is there this liminal space between the two? Are we stuck with some traditional constructs?
And what could you try?
Right. So what happens if you say, you ask a few more questions, you find out what's really being asked. Where's the urgency? Where's the nice to have versus the must have? And you say, I can help you with this. Unfortunately, I can't help you with this right now. Or actually, I don't even know anything about the second ask, but I can introduce you to someone. And so it's being a good listener, asking good questions in the moment. I think caring enough to be curious, to say, tell me more versus no.
Being willing to have the conversation.
Okay. I think in a sense that's being sort of other oriented more than even just saying, yeah. Where do you want to go from here?
Oh, what an excellent coaching question. I think we got it. I think we did it. Where can people find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I also have a website, erinwinklermccue.com.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining my experiment.
Thanks for welcoming me.
This has been Deep Work Out Loud. I'm Julie Harris Oliver. If any of this resonates with you, please subscribe and leave a review at all the podcast places. If you'd like to work with me, you can find me at julieharrisoliver.com. And let me leave you with this. What's an experiment that you can try this week? Go try it. Report back. Thanks for listening. See you next time.